welcome back to another edition to the Root to Rising podcast, and I am your host, Christine Hummel. I am here again with another special guest, Melissa, who will tell us about her personal and professional journey. As a reminder, this podcast is a platform that's been created for women to share their experiences, their stories, for other women to listen, gain knowledge, and to make sure they find their true happiness and purpose. So with that, Melissa, I'd like to welcome you to the show, and please introduce yourself for our audience.
Thanks, Christine. So my name is Melissa Lawrence. I am the founder and author of Your Worthy Career. So what I do is I provide career and leadership coaching for women who work in pharma and biotech. And it's really a blend for me of organizational psychology and some proven career and leadership development principles that really help women find their authentic and meaningful role within this industry. Occasionally ends up being outside of this industry, but they always start in when we get to work. And so I like to share too, Your Worthy Career, I came up with because it represents not just finding a career that's worthy of you, that you feel represents your talents and your expertise, but also that you feel worthy of. There's a lot that comes up in the work that I do around confidence and your own value and just the experience women can have being a woman in the world, but also a woman in this industry, that we kind of tackle things from the inside and the outside.
That's awesome. So when you were in high school and college, did you ever think you'd be doing this today?
You know, it actually wasn't that far off. So I will say the industry piece was a little bit of a surprise. When I was in high school, I wanted to be an art teacher. I did those aptitude tests that you do when you're in school. And it led me towards social work and counseling, which is a little similar. I actually started my professional career working in child welfare, thinking I wanted to be a social worker. And so to me, everything that has happened across my career has led me to where I am now. So I see the through line, but at the time, I didn't think I'm going to have my own business. I'm going to write a book. I'm going to, work within the pharma and biotech space. That certainly wasn't on my radar.
So when you went to college, what did you major in? And how did you choose that major?
So my undergrad, so I have an interesting educational background. So when I graduated high school, I didn't go to college right away because my mindset was, I don't want to spend a lot of money on something I don't know that I want to do. And so I decided to go into work first. And that's where I ended up working with a consulting firm for the state of Wisconsin, where I'm originally from, working on the child welfare side, kind of supporting social workers. And so as I was in that role for a couple of years, I had a really wonderful boss who said, Melissa, you are so smart and talented, and people are going to judge you based on your resume. And so I know you're great. And so I was able to actually rise into a lot of leadership roles when I worked at that company. But she was like, you really need to go to school. Like, you need to get some sort of degree and figure it out. And so I started with something that was really practical, which was management. So supervisory management. It was through a technical school. So I started with a 2-year degree. It was a little bit harder as a working professional. I was to do night classes and work during the day. But I did that first. And then from there, I got an undergrad in communications. And so communications is really fundamental, obviously, to the workplace. It's fundamental to the work that I do. But it also was something that I was just really fascinated by when I was in the workforce, of all of this conflict that we have can often come down to communication. And so I thought, well, if I go to school and I get a degree in communication, I'm going to be an expert and be able to communicate perfectly with everyone, no matter what. And that is obviously not the way it works.
And you make it sound so easy.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. So when you were, that's a big decision. Like when you graduate high school, I think a lot of people assume like the next thing you have to do is go to college, right? I would say, and I love your opinion here too, is maybe today it sounds and feels a little bit different just with so much AI or different tech that we're utilizing, or, kids are able to do more of a trade type schooling versus jumping into college. But, that's a big decision to make coming out of high school, pretty mature, to be self-aware, to say, hey, I have no idea what I want to do. I spend the money. So walk us through, was that a hard decision for you? And did you have support from the people around you to make that decision?
So I would say it was easy in some ways, and that just, like, the math wasn't mathing. Like, financially, I would have had to go into debt to go to college, so that was a big driver for me. The part that was difficult about it is having friends going that path and
Mm,
wanting that experience and, the experience in the dorms and all of that you can't really do if you decide to go back when you're 25.
right.
So it's something that, like, you're kind of missing out on from that perspective, but it also felt like it was the right decision for me. My kids are going through something like this now, so I have a 19-year-old who is just now moving out on his own, decided not to go to college out of high
Mhm.
school and decided to kinda get into the workforce and he wants to go to a trade school and he wants to build a business and he wants to do things a little bit differently. And then my daughter is a sophomore in high school right now, and she really wants to go to college. And so we're already touring colleges. Like every time we go somewhere, she wants to see what that college is. And she's thinking of it from the perspective of the experience she
Yep,
wants to have.
yep,
So her view isn't, I don't even want to look at what programs they have yet. I want to go
yep.
experience the climate of the college so that when I get to that point, I will have an idea of what feels right for me. So it's to me that's very different than how I saw people making that decision when I
Yeah,
was
good
younger.
for her. Good for both of them to be, like, realizing what they need. So, back to my other question is, do you think, in your opinion, that the way that, our generation looked at college as the next step, right? It was just going back in time, and I bring it back to we've evolved as humans in terms of just where we are in the world, from our brains are getting smarter, right? We have parents that maybe didn't go to college. Maybe we were first generation or second generation that went to college, but we've evolved in terms of being smarter, faster, more efficient. So do you think there is a need today, that advice that that manager gave you when you were working, and she told you you have to have a college education on your resume? Do you think that still holds true today, or do you think there's a different opinion out there on that today versus what you and I, from a generation comparison, went through?
I definitely think it has shifted. So I think there obviously our society is made up of all sorts of generations. So there's still many people, really regardless of the generation, that think that's really important to go to college right
Yep.
outside of high school. However, to me, I think the conversation has shifted a little bit to return on investment and
Mm,
looking at it more just like you would any business or development expense of I think before it was that's just what you do. You go to
yeah.
college, it doesn't matter what you choose, it doesn't matter where you go, that's just what you do. And if you
Yep.
don't, then you have almost like this mark on you that you didn't do it. It was
Yeah.
kind of more off the beaten path. Where now I think it's very normal to kind of make sure, like, what do I want to do? What is that return on investment? Because
Yeah.
this is something that's going to cost money.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's more accepted today. Did your friends, when you chose to pause and go to the workforce first, what did your friends think? Or did they have a different opinion or perspective of you when you made that decision out of high school?
Mm. So I had some friends that did the same thing as me, and then I also had some friends that went the more traditional route. I don't think that it was necessarily frowned upon in my friend group. I had supportive friends and it was circumstantial, right?
Mm,
And so a lot of my friends that took that route, they didn't have to take on all the debt themselves. And so that was something that was just accepted. So it was kind of understood of like, okay, I can see why you want to go
yep.
this route and figure things out first because this is going to be 100% your burden.
That makes sense. So if you would go back in time, knowing what you know now as an experienced professional, would you do anything different when you graduated high school?
No. I really
Why?
wouldn't. Because everything that I invested in for my education, everything that I did gave me a set of experiences. And so if I had gone to school right outside of high school, I wouldn't have worked for this other consulting firm with the state of Wisconsin for 8 years. I wouldn't have had that whole experience. I wouldn't have discovered that I really didn't have the heart to be face to face with these children in these
Mm,
vulnerable situations and that the paperwork of it was enough. I wouldn't have built myself as a leader. I wouldn't have had the experience of not relying on my education to prove myself. So there's so many experiences I gained by not going, in addition to, that management degree led me to the communications degree, which led me to the organizational psychology graduate degree. I think from my perspective, a strength that I have is love of learning, and that takes you through your whole life. So there's always an opportunity to continue to learn, and there's a lot of ways you can do that.
I love that. And so many guests on my show talk about they wouldn't go back. No one ever says they would go back and change anything. they do believe, similar to you, that you have certain experiences for a reason. Some are good, some are bad, and you just make the best out of each. And actually, one of my guests actually said there's no wasted experience, because even if it's hard and something fails, you still learn from that experience. And I agree. I think you are where you are today because of the path that happened. And if you change one thing, who knows if you would have ended up where you are today, right?
For sure. I mean, it doesn't stop me from, like, joking with my daughter, though, when we go on these tours to say, "Maybe I'll enroll too, and I'll come live in your dorm. I never got to have this experience."
I'm sure she would love it. I'm sure it
No,
wouldn't be a problem at all.
right.
I know. Well,
She's
even go ahead.
No, go ahead.
My daughter, she went to University of Alabama, right? And
Mm.
even in any college today, like we went on the visits and I saw these dorms compared to when I went to college. Like the dorms were the size of a closet today. They had a single bed in it and like you shared a bathroom. And then you go on all these visits and these dorms look like my first apartment or even my second apartment when I had my own job. They're beautiful, they're updated. And to your point, though, they make it all about that experience. And so these kids are just they see things so differently from how we started.
Mhm.
So,
Yes.
but good for them. So let's go. You bumped through really quickly a very impressive career that brought you to social work and then consulting. So maybe talk us through. You received your undergrad in communications and management, and then what happened, and walk us through your career path during that time.
So, I actually got my undergrad while I worked in industry. So I worked for this consulting firm with the state of Wisconsin for about 8 years. And what I discovered over that time is as I kind of rose in these management positions, I really liked helping people learn and grow and kind of coach them, and I just was naturally doing that, and so I got to the point that I loved that more than the technical work that I was doing,
Mm.
and so an opportunity opened up with a CRO, and they were hiring someone to be the trainer of their
Could
audit.
you explain what a CRO is for the audience?
Yeah, a contract research organization. So it was Covance, which I believe is now owned by LabCorp. And so they were hiring someone to train their auditors on non-clinical toxicology data. I didn't even know what that meant, the non-clinical toxicology data piece. Science was never my strong suit. And so but I knew how to train people and I knew how to help people learn. And so what happened and why I actually was able to get that role is the the hiring team was a learning and development team. And then they provided trainers and leadership development people to each of the functions within the organization. And so the stakeholder was the quality assurance group, but the
Mm,
hiring group was the learning people. So the
hmm,
learning people were like, "Oh, she knows how to train. She can do this thing." The QA people were like, she doesn't even meet the qualifications of the people we hire for this job. How is she going to teach them how
yep,
to do their job, right?"
yep.
Long story short, I won out and was hired, went into that role. And so I found myself teaching auditors how to walk through a vivarium where we were doing non-clinical studies and how to monitor for enrichment and do necropsies and all of these different things. And I actually cut their onboarding time down by 66%. So instead of
Wow.
9 months, it only took 3 months for them to be performing without having to have someone overseeing their work. And so that was an opportunity to really prove myself that, okay, this is a transferable skill. It doesn't matter the
Yep.
context. But I loved being in the industry. I loved like the impact on patients that we
Yep.
have. I loved like being around people that were so brilliant in ways that I was not brilliant and being able to kind of blow their mind with the things they don't know about how they can learn things and them
Mm,
blowing my mind all the time. Like it just was a really rewarding environment to be in. And so it was there that I actually went and got my communications degree shortly after I started. And so I started kind of in this training role, and then I went into instructional design. And then I went into like kind of performance consulting, which was like helping identify what is the root cause when something goes wrong and helping see if training fits in a solution with that. And then through that, I was then an opportunity came across to move out to Maryland from Wisconsin to work for Human Genome Sciences, which is
hmm.
now GSK, and they were looking for a training manager for research and development. And so relocated, moved out here. They relocated me, and then I was in that role. About a year later, GSK acquired them, so I wasn't there long, but it was a wonderful experience. And then I went into a biotech, into Emergent, and then the last space that I worked with was AstraZeneca. And so it was AstraZeneca. I was there for 6 years, and that's really when I got into organizational development and organizational psychology through that experience, through going to town halls. I was in kind of a training function, and I was seeing how change management was handled. I was seeing just how things work in this industry. And I would go to my leadership and I would say, okay, why are we doing this? Why don't we do this? And I had a boss at the time who wasn't my favorite boss, but he gave me really great advice. And he said, you have a lot of complaints about the way that we handle like the people aspect. Have you ever thought about going back to school for organizational development? and
Interesting.
and moving out of training and into that function
Interesting.
because you're so passionate about it, right?
Interesting.
And so I was like, no, I hadn't. I actually had never considered that. So I started researching that. I
Huh.
actually loved organizational psychology more than organizational development. And so then I went and to grad school, and they were so supportive. I was able to kind of use them as my testing
That's
ground for
awesome.
everything in grad school, for my thesis, everything I was able to do there. And then I was able to then have a role created for me to lead talent and development within biologics.
That's an awesome story. There's a couple questions I need to pick up on.
Yeah.
So, going back to the CRO role,
hmm
you weren't qualified for the role. The quality team struggled with you not meeting their requirements, but you got the job. How
hmm
did you get the job, and why did you get the job if you weren't qualified?
So when you're hired, there's more than one person making the decision. And so the actual hiring team believed I was the best person for the position.
Mm,
So I had a couple of things going on. One is I was able to demonstrate. So I went in and I did a presentation. I was able to kind of show them, like they gave me something scientific and I taught them better than what they had seen from other people that had the scientific background. I also used my lack of scientific background to my
mm,
advantage,
mm.
because when I'm going in with my expertise, I'm going to be a better trainer, a better facilitator when that is my craft, as opposed to someone who is a subject matter expert
Yep.
who's down in the weeds and then
Yep.
has to kind of build that craft on top of it. And so I was able to prove myself in the interview, but I also had the fortunate experience of having the hiring manager and the leadership of that department on my side to do kind of my bidding for me. Obviously, within the organization, they were able to say, okay, here's what she's going to be able to do. And let's give her a try and all of those things. And yeah, fun fact, that hiring manager actually was the officiant of my wedding. So
No way.
we became great friends. Like after I wasn't
Oh my
reporting to him
gosh.
anymore, we still talk, and that was many, many years ago. So yeah, I mean, relationships, just I think, and how you present yourself really make a difference. I help people get roles they're not technically the most qualified for all the time.
Yeah, and it is interesting the people we meet along the way, like this person who was your hiring manager, advocated you to get the role, and now he's an officiant at your wedding. You never know who the people that are going to be impactful are in your life. So, treat everyone as equals and with respect and engage and have those conversations because again, you're going to learn something from them and you never
hmm
know who that person can be in your life, which brings me to the question where you mentioned you were talking about the boss that you didn't necessarily care for, yet he gave you advice to say, "Hey, you have a lot of complaints about all these different people and organizations, go back to school." So, how does that work? Like, why didn't you like him? And then how do you take such a comment from someone you don't like and you went and did something with it? Like, how did you get past that, "Hey, I don't like him, but I'm still gonna take his advice," right?
So the reason he was fine. The reason he wasn't my favorite is I felt that it was a little bit of a boys club in the
Mm,
group at that time.
mhm,
And so it appeared, my experience was that there was a little bit of playing favorites and giving
got
a
it,
little bit more weight to some of the other men on the team. And so I found it increasingly difficult to be able to work with him
got
because
it.
how he was in one-on-ones, it's like he was like, let me show you, my favorite cat videos on YouTube, right? And it's like we didn't use it just was like not an optimum work experience for
Hmm,
me. but you're not gonna love every boss. I've been blessed with wonderful bosses, and I've been blessed with ones that, are not that great, and there's always something to learn
Yep.
from them. So I would say, to me, some of the best feedback can come from people that are not your supporters. And there's many reasons that can happen, and one of them can be similar to what happened with me, of that they can give you something because they're frustrated, right?
Mm,
And so they might say something that they wouldn't normally say, right?
mm,
So that feedback that I got of, and I don't know if you used complaining or feedback, but that I'm talking a lot about something I want to change, so maybe I should empower myself to do something with it
mhm,
essentially. Probably wouldn't have never come up in my performance review. It probably would have never come up in any sort of other context. My performance reviews are always glowing. And to me, some of the
huh,
feedback that I've gotten that has really helped shape my career, like when I had a role created for me with AstraZeneca, it was because another piece of feedback from a different boss that never would have been in my performance review.
hmm,
And so I
interesting.
think being open to people's feedback
Mhm,
is really important regardless of who it comes from. You can always decide what to do with it. You can always decide if you're going to give it credibility or not. The other piece of feedback that I had was that I needed to expand my network within the organization. And I resisted that at first because I I was in a site-wide role, a lot I had global partners, like, to me, I was like, "How can I increase my network? People know who I am." Well, I worked in a company that had 60,000 employees globally, clearly not everyone knew who I was,
yeah,
and when I started, accepting that feedback and looking at who else can I build relationships with, who else can I benefit from and they can benefit from me, who is in meetings with my boss that I'm not in that could be a positive influencer for me. That's how I was really able to expand my role and get
hmm.
buy-in for things that were initially resisted. But that feedback just came kind of flippantly in conversation.
I think that's important to listen to. We get feedback all day long, every day, if we want it or not, from different people we like or dislike. And it's hard to listen to feedback to someone that you don't like or that you may have a certain perception of or, has treated you poorly. And I think you make a great point is that sometimes the feedback may be something that is something you need to hear, but how do you get over there's a disconnect when someone tells you something that you in your eyes doesn't have the same credibility as someone that you like and makes you feel comfortable every day. How do we get over that feeling that we should listen and accept that feedback? Because I think what you did in that moment was you make it sound a lot easier than it actually was. But most people that don't like their boss, they're probably not going to listen to 99% of the things that they say because they don't like that person. It's uncomfortable for them. So how did you get
Mhm.
over that and separate your dislike or what advice would you give to someone if they hear hard feedback from someone they like, how to make it more objective and not make it emotional and disconnect what they feel for that person versus what the words that's coming out of that person's mouth?
Mhm. That's a great question. Um, I am someone that's very motivated to be successful, to achieve what I want in life. And so sometimes when that feedback comes, the perspective I have is I'm not where I want to be. And do I really want to be so stubborn to
Mm,
discount something someone said because I don't like them? If I was where I wanted to be, then and I was happy with the situation, happy with the relationship, I might not consider it, right?
mm,
But in those situations where those came up, I did wanna change. I did wanna make a bigger impact so I
mm,
could listen to that feedback from that first boss. The other person was I felt like I'd kinda hit a ceiling. There wasn't anywhere else for me to
mm,
go. And so I was like, if I was gonna listen to this feedback, what would I do with it? Or I'll ask myself, if I wanted to believe this was true, what would I have to think about this? Right?
mm,
And I also, if I'm really resistant to something, I'll collect data on it. So if you
mhm,
get feedback from someone you just don't think is true at all, like you think that they're just out for you, right? Then you could say, okay, well, I'm going to validate this. Like, go
yeah,
talk to some people and see, is this their experience? Do a 360, get anonymous feedback. You can do that without an official tool, just to see, what do people think of when they think of me? Is this something that I should really work on? But to me, in the workplace specifically, people's perception is the reality. So they could have you completely wrong, but if
Yep.
that's their perception, that's the story. It's like kind of company culture. It's like that's the culture of you that other people are experiencing. And so you have a choice. And I like to think about it from a more empowering place. I have a client right now that's working with a very difficult boss, and she has a choice. Like, do you want to just be right?
Yep. Yep.
Or do you want to figure out how to work with this person knowing that they have a strong influence on your career? Right.
Right.
And look at it from a skill development of you're going to get to learn how to work with someone that's really difficult. And when you're able to do that, you can do that anywhere
Yep.
because we're never going
Agree.
to get rid of difficult people.
Yeah, that would be boring if we got if everyone was the same, that would be pretty boring if everyone got along. So that's great advice. And the willingness just to listen to all feedback and then to your point of what you do with it. But you're right, timing, place and time has a lot to do with it. If you're willing and ready to listen to it. And I think it's important that you validate it, use other data, even if you don't find it credible coming from that person, get some data to support it or ask someone else about it. So that is great advice. So you had a very progressive career. You've always gone to the next, right? You've always challenged yourself to learn more and do different. It sounded like you wanted to continue when you, like the last stint was the performance and the organizational. So why do you think you're so motivated? What makes you motivated? Is that something that was innate with you when you've always grown up? Is it something that you learned because of the rewards of the progress you made? Uh, I often have this conversation and debate. I don't know the answer either, but there's different people that are more motivated than others. So why do you think, or what was the root cause of your motivation to make you so successful and how you've progressed with your career today?
That's another great question. So I don't consider myself just a very like motivated, active person. I consider myself connected to a deeper purpose into
Mm,
why I do what I do. So for me, I've always wanted to make a positive impact on other people, and that's driven every career decision that I've made. It was in the child welfare and the social worker aspect, it was I want to help these kids, right? And then it was, I want to help adults be more successful in their role. And then when it was the organizational psychology, it was I want to help employees have a better employee experience and
yep,
a better experience with work. And I've always just felt very drawn to having a bigger impact. So any place that I felt stuck and I kind of made a pivot,
mm,
it's because there's a bigger impact I felt I could be making. Like I'm someone that if I feel I could be making a bigger impact, I can't not do it. Like I almost like give myself that responsibility of advocating for others
yeah,
and helping them, build a life that they're really proud of. And I think all of our experiences shape that, right? There's probably a ton of psychology behind being that person for other people. So I think that it's something that if you're connected to, it's like Simon Sinek talks about
yep,
the why, having your why. And so I
yep,
think if you are connected to why you're doing what you're doing, then you can get
yep.
the motivation to do anything.
Yeah, well, that's great advice. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing today, and how you got to creating your own business, and just some of the different stories or people that you're dealing with, that you hear oftentimes that are common themes from some of the women you primarily coach.
Mhm. So I got into I feel like I, on some level, always wanted to have my own business. I just didn't know what it was. So when I was 19, I remember that I wanted to be an event planner I wanted to be like a wedding planner, and I was thinking of doing a wedding planning business.
That
And
sounds
actually
fun.
yeah, and when I started college, like the 2 associate's degree program, I actually started in event planning, and then
Mm,
I switched to something more practical at the time, because I decided that's not the path that I wanted to go down. So I had this little bit of like entrepreneur spirit, I would say. And so I had people, again, other mentors, other people I worked with when I was in industry say, this work really is more consulting. This work really is something that you could do on your own business and have a bigger impact because you'd be in more control of it. And I was like, no, no, no. And that was really coming down to fear of
mm,
being on my own, making it on my own. Uh, I established my business in 2019 and I went full time in 2020. And it got to the point that math wasn't a problem anymore. I had kind of managed all of the actual circumstances around having a business, but then I couldn't take that leap. I was
mm,
feeling like, "Oh my gosh, like, What if I'm homeless? What if my kids get taken away from me? Because very extreme things. So obviously, a lot would have to happen for any of that to happen, right? And so I just was like, I don't know, I can't do it. Like I worked so hard for my career. Like I had a really great job, so it was hard
Yeah.
to. It's not
Why
like I
can't I
hated
just
it.
be happy with what I
Yes.
have? Why do I do that often?
Yes, I spent years feeling that way in different contexts.
Yeah.
And eventually I just was like, you know what, this is something that I'm going to regret it. I use it to make decisions
Mm,
a lot. Like I think
mm,
when I'm 80 and I look back on my life, am I going to regret never knowing if
good
I
for
could do
you.
this? Am I going to regret not doing the thing that's on my mind? It's what got me signed up for pickleball lessons I'm starting this week. So like it just works for everything. Like, well, I will not let myself be the one to hold myself back. So
When I'm 80 and I am sitting there, am I gonna regret
yes.
playing pickleball and not signing up
Yes.
ever?
And
I love it.
I would like see a movie of someone playing it and be like, oh, I could have learned how to do that. And I just didn't do it because I was worried I'd suck, you know? So
That's
eventually,
awesome. I love
yeah.
it.
So I just made a plan and said, okay, I'm going to give myself, a year to like get this business off the ground and see what happens. If it all goes up in flames and no one wants to hire me, then I'll just get another job. I'll just go
Yep,
back into industry.
yep.
That is an option. And so that's kind of what got me started. I was fortunate in that, especially due to the nature of my role, I had actually created career counseling programs within the company I worked for. So I was fortunate in that when I left, then I had people say, "Oh, well, now you're not here anymore. So how can I work
Mhm,
with you?" And so I was able
mhm.
to get clients, pretty early on, pretty easily. And then since then, it's just been kind of growing. And now it's really fun because it started with people I knew in some way. And now it's people that I don't know at all. And my reach is getting larger. And again, that impact that I'm making, I'm just seeing in a lot of different ways. And even the way that these women talk and the ripple effect they're having with their relationships because of the work we're doing. So it's just very rewarding.
Can you tell the audience a little bit about, like, what type of coaching you do and your target audience and just common conversations that you're having to help them along?
hmm So the women that I work with, so it's women in industry. I would say the median is kind of like a principal scientist to senior director, but there's always outliers. People higher, lower on that spectrum, but they're all really coming for the same thing, which is they get to a point that they're starting something new or they feel stuck and they're not sure how to handle it and they want to do well. So a common thing is I don't know what my next role should be. Like I'm not fulfilled by what I'm doing anymore. A lot of the women do some of what we talked about where they kind of do that next logical thing either from pressure from their family or their own
Mhm.
internal drive or what society tells us to do. And so they build this successful career and then they kind of look around and they're like, I thought I'd feel different. I thought this would be better. Like
Mm,
I'm burnt out. And so, but they don't know what's next because they've built their career doing this one thing and they're not seeing any upward mobility. They're not
mm.
seeing anything that looks enticing or that feels like it's not a lot of risk. So then they reach out to me to figure out what is that next best role. And a lot of times what we do is we get a role created for them, similar to what I've done for myself by getting really clear on what it is that they want and then
Mm.
creating the business case for that because it's something that's I think really amazing about this industry specifically is due to the innovation, the science aspect, it's very agile, it's always changing. Like these reorgs can really be
Yep,
used to your advantage.
yep,
And so when you're able to know exactly the problems you want to solve and why that's a value to your company and not just for you because you've worked for it, you can have a lot of really great conversations that can lead to really rewarding opportunities. So that's one piece. Another can be going into a new leadership role or a higher level of leadership than what they've had before and wanting to be able to lead their teams well. Or they want to get promoted and they're kind of getting all of the reasons around budget and layoffs. And we
yep.
have lots of new leaders always coming in. So there's always, I feel like, an element of, well, we have to wait till this new leader comes on and see what happens there before we can do that. So it's really when you're at a pivot point and you want more for your career and you're not really sure how to get there, then we work on the practical skills of navigating the workplace around like communication and influence and those difficult stakeholders and navigating promotion cycles and feedback and things like that, but also building a lot of self-awareness into how you feel, your own confidence, what you're bringing to the table, and really gaining control over your nervous system, like
Mm,
emotional regulation, seeing how your thoughts are connected to your feelings, to your behavior, becoming more aware of things that honestly, we always swap thoughts and feelings when we're talking. A lot of people can't name their feelings and don't
mhm.
even understand what they're thinking that's driving some of their decisions because so much of what we do is just programmed in our subconscious. So we really address both things so that they're in control and always have a path forward, but they're also using skills that work for this industry.
That's awesome, and then to be so specific in this industry, because there's a lot of different dynamics that goes on, to your point with the innovation, with the type of leadership. You have global versus US, male-dominated versus, female. So you have a lot to talk about with women, I'm sure. Are
Mhm.
there any common themes that you hear from women that come to you with that's something that they can't get over themselves, that you think is specific to women versus men? Like, it could be more of like women overthink things, or they never feel like they're qualified for the next job. Like, do you hear any common themes with who you talk to that creates barriers that could be more general takeaways for the audience to hear in terms of how we show up differently in a professional environment?
Mhm. I think something that is hard for some people to understand is that the technical expertise that you've worked really hard for isn't enough when you get to certain levels within the organization. And when they see, men, rubbing shoulders with other men, I mean, like, the boys club where they see like a male colleague get promoted instead of them. I think because a lot of my clients are like A-plus students that have always really prided themselves on the achievement and the hard work and the way that they deliver for the team, that yes, there is bias, and also sometimes we assume it's bias when it's
Yeah.
actually a different skill set. And so, like, the thing that I like to impart is when it comes to women specifically, like, we have many of us have a lot of natural talent in things that men don't naturally have talent in.
Mm,
Like, and it's not, of course, universal, but things like empathy and leadership and communication and talking through things, like, that's something that a lot of women can do more naturally.
mm,
And I think sometimes the narrative that we can see on social media or in our society or in our workplace is to make those things not important or to make them
mm,
weak. And then I think we get a little confused on what to focus on when we're looking to advance because the messaging is really conflicting. But
mhm.
something that I think is really important to know is I think it was McKinsey's Women in Workplace report from this past that came out a couple of months ago said that we're 50 years away from pay equity for women.
Oh my gosh.
And that for some of us is gonna be beyond our working lifetime, if
Yeah.
not our lifetime at all. And so I think it's important, similar to what we talked about with the feedback, to
Yeah.
not let a circumstance stop you from what you want and just to build the skill to get what you want. To me,
Yeah.
like, these things are like, whether it's the layoffs, whether it's being in a male-dominated space or a reorg or a budget cut, like, that is just context for your
Mm,
career. It is not the outcome. And so I think I spent myself time in my career being upset with the way things were, that I wasn't, and what that looks like, if I'm specific, is like when I wanted to get promoted and I wasn't getting promoted.
mm,
And I would see, men getting more recognition than I felt they deserved. I could come home and have some wine and complain all night long about that and how terrible it is and how, like, woe's me. And it was woe's me, right? But it's kind of like you have to, like, cry a
yeah.
river and then build a bridge to get over
Yep.
it. Like, it's
Yep.
like you have to just move on because it's only hurting me to sit in
Right.
that space. So instead,
Right.
it's like, okay, if I can just say, this is the fact, this is my experience, this is what's happening. What do I want to do about it?
Yep.
To me, that's a more empowering place than to think things are just what they are, or to kind of keep your blinders on when you get that feedback and just ignore it. Like, for example, I talked to someone last week and she said she was working towards a specific internal lateral move at the director level. She had her boss on board, she had everyone on board that this was going to happen. The role opened up. She interviewed and she didn't get the job.
Mm,
And she got 3 paragraphs of feedback, which is wonderful, but some of that feedback she had never heard before, which
hmm.
was she needs to work on her leadership communication. She doesn't come off as confident when she's in certain meetings, right? And those were things that don't tend to come up in performance reviews.
Right.
Don't, those are things you have to take ownership of and seek out yourself. If you're not where you want to be, yes, we have, I mean, I feel like I could talk forever about this because I also think about, women weren't able to get their own bank account until the 70s. Like,
Mm.
we are working with people that are not, are that just inherently are going to view women differently, even when they're
Correct.
really great people. Like, that's just their
Correct.
experience.
Right.
And so we can't just sit on, oh my gosh, there's bias. I can't have what I want. It's like
Yep.
there is bias, there is discrimination. Some's intentional, some's not. What do you want to do about it?
Right.
And that's where
Right.
I think skill development, especially around communication, leadership, like that, those are going to become more in demand as AI rises because AI can't do those things. And so that is how you can become more marketable, protect your own career without working in necessarily a trade. If you want to go this kind of corporate route, is to learn those human people skills that can't be replaced.
Yeah, I agree. Two points I want to hit on is number one, your point that if you get that feedback to your comment, if someone says no to you and you sit there and you have that glass of wine and you do the woe me, if you don't do anything differently or find out the feedback of the why, you're going to have a lot of nights with wine, right? Like nothing's going to change. So I agree that you have to be aware of who you're working with, the audience and the context that you have to be aware of in order to navigate through, your goal in that situation. So that's great advice to say if you don't listen to the feedback, if you don't listen to the change required, nothing will change in terms of your career journey. So that's a very important point. And then your comment on AI, which is a theme that I've been having a lot of discussion as, and it's a great point to say AI may replace some of the more tactical work or the planning or the programming. However, the critical thinking, the leadership, what we do with that information, I agree with you. It's going to swing to even lean on more heavily required. And I would say today, which because this is what you do every day, there's a gap in communication today. Not even with AI, 1, 2, 3, 5 years from now. And so what's your go a little bit deeper on that perspective in terms of what happens 1 to 3 years from now when AI continues to evolve, maybe enhance or replace some people's job? What would you share with either experienced professionals that are already in current roles of leadership and or maybe those that are graduating or in college that you would recommend that they focus on that would help them prepare for what's coming ahead?
So I think a couple things. I think it is the communication skills. Just like I said earlier, I went to school for communication thinking now I'm going to be able to communicate effectively with everyone all the time, but that's not the way it is. You have frameworks and things and understanding, and you apply those to different people. And so that is why communication will always be something that is needed. It is, I mean, it affects everything in relationships, marriages, friends, workplace. So building your communication skills, your ability to influence and be heard and understood is something that will just pay you back forever. So I think that is really important. The other thing that's important is your relationships. So when people are making decisions around who stays, who doesn't, the relationships really play a role, and not necessarily in the way of, okay, this person's friends with the boss so they got to keep their job. I don't mean it like that. I mean, when people know who you are, the impact that you make, the value that you have, the way you contribute to the organization, you're more likely to have a place found for you in this future of AI, because we will always need humans in this work that we do, than if someone doesn't know that about you and you're just, head
Yeah.
down working in a cubicle somewhere. And
Yep.
so having relationships with people is really important. That's how a lot of hiring decisions get made. It's a lot when they're looking at who they want in the future. The other thing that I would think about is how you can make AI relevant to you without being overwhelmed. So, AI could be a whole other episode we could talk about, I feel like.
Yeah, I agree.
But with, like, people will ask me, "Do you have any courses you recommend on what I
Yep.
could learn with AI?"
Yep.
And my answer is that I think it's something that you should know about fundamentally, because I think about my mom, for example. She was a nursing assistant when I was younger, and she never learned to type.
Mm,
And as she got older, it really limited any job she could have when she didn't
mhm,
wanna do the physical nursing anymore.
mhm,
And because she just was like, computers, whatever, don't need that. And so
mhm.
AI may be regulated, may not be as big as they're saying, we don't know, but at least giving yourself some acumen,
Yep,
some understanding of what it is and how it can be used. And then within the context of your expertise, so
yep,
that you can create some thought leadership around it. So you can have
yep.
your own ideas and opinions on how it can be used. You can help your company if that's the direction that they're going. Because if you're resistant and that's where they're going, then you won't be part of the solution that they're looking to have.
Mm,
So I think it's important to have scope though, because I think some people go in and they're like, I'm going to do all the LinkedIn learning on AI and I'm going to learn everything about Claude and about ChatGPT and all of these
yep,
things. And then you're overwhelmed and you're also replacing your own thoughts. So I
agreed.
think you have to keep it within your scope.
I agreed. I do tell college students that you have to learn it, and think your job that you want or your major that you want to invest in, make sure you don't think about how it is today. Think about it more in the future and what that job looks like when you graduate. Is that job modified by AI? Is it replaced? Is it enhanced? And then learn that skill set to help be ready for the time you graduate. Because fortunately or unfortunately, I think fortunately just from us being smarter, but unfortunately for students in the midst of this transition, it is a different take on how they prepare to be in this job market. And then I do agree with you on the critical thinking skills. I think our generation, we're in a sweet spot because we hopefully already know how to critically think, and now we have AI. So we're at a great intersection where we get to do both. What keeps me up at night is the high schoolers that are using AI now that they're the most familiar with, or even middle school, and then you continue to lean on that. Do you have critical thinking skills to know what to do with the output of the AI information? That's what that, scares me is we can still critically think, but you're only so good with AI on the questions that you ask it or the information you're feeding it. And if you never critically think and know how to think, how are you going to ever be able to utilize it? And even that, but you carry that over to like a life lesson, there's tons of critical thinking you do every day outside of your job. So are these younger generation, are they gonna have that same critical thinking perspective? And I don't know your thoughts on that.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's so important. You're so right. I think the education system is so conflicting because they'll use textbooks that are already outdated and say
Yeah,
don't use AI, but you can only use a Chromebook and everything has to be electronic. Like it makes no sense to
yeah,
me at all.
I agree.
But I do think having your I honestly think this is probably some of the hardest work that the younger generations are going to have to
I agree.
do is to come up with their own ideas and thoughts and to
Okay.
resist AI because I think about especially with the age of my kids how they kind of technology even changed just obviously in the last 19 years, but they have a lot of influences that I didn't have when I grew up. Like, we've always had societal norms and
Yeah,
taboos and expectations, but right now with social media and with AI, you're literally told how to think. You get constant
yeah,
feedback and constant influence that I worry that younger generations won't know who they are, and that's why we see so
agreed.
much fluidity with everything is it's because they don't know who they are. And then you add in AI and then they don't know what they think. And then it just creates kind of shells of who that person really could be, which sounds a little dark, but it's totally solvable. I think it's just making an intention of where am I going to spend some time, whether it's journaling a few
Yep,
times a week or something to be like, what do
yep,
I think about this
yeah,
thing that happened? What
yeah,
are my ideas? Because that's going to help you not embrace an authentic like, know who you really are and live up to your own potential, but you'll be able to use that. That'll be so marketable in the workplace because you're gonna have ideas that no one else can just put into a computer and get the same thing of.
I agree. Great, perspective on it, and I agree with you, AI can be a whole different segment of conversation. I would love to do, like, a round table, and maybe I'll do this, like, if we find someone that's an AI, like they own an AI vendor, AI tool, and then you
Mm.
have people from like leadership and you have a good debate conversation of pros and cons. So maybe I'll add that to the list.
Yeah, it's a great idea.
So to wrap it up, we'd love to hear a little bit. You wrote a book and what the
Mhm.
book title is, why you wrote it, and what's it about, a little bit of a sneak preview.
Mhm. Thank you. So, yes, my book came out in February. It's called Your Worthy Career: A Science-Backed Method to Build a Meaningful Career in Pharma and Biotech. And so what it does is it shares more of my experience as a woman working in the industry, but there's a lot of other stories in there of different women that I've met, different bosses I've had, different clients I've had, and kind of their journey. So you'll always find yourself in one of those stories, but then it also gives you the method that I use, which covers a lot of the things that we talked about today, with the premise of trying to find your hidden door that's authentic to you, your place to grow in your career. And then there's exercises in it too, so you can kind of apply
Awesome.
what you learn as you go through it. So I would definitely recommend that as a resource if that sounds interesting. You can get it on Barnes& and Noble or Amazon.
Awesome. We'll make sure that we include that in the show notes and the link so that people can take a look at that book.
Awesome,
So,
thank you.
Melissa, I want to thank you for such a great conversation today. I think you're making a definite impact in women's lives that need that extra support and time to just navigate through their career. So, thank you for being a guest on Road to Rising.
Thanks for the conversation, Christine.
Of course. So, with that, another episode with Melissa. Thanks for all that joining Road to Rising, which is a reminder is a platform created for women to gain information, knowledge, and confidence to find their true happiness and purpose.